Friends, ladies and gentlemen, at this time we are going to begin the memorial services for Dr. Arnold Tobin. If you have a cell... Yes, ma'am. At this time, we are going to begin the memorial service for Dr. Arnold Tobin. If you have a cell phone or a pager, I would ask for you to please take a moment to turn it off or place it in the silent mode. And officiating today's services will be Rabbi Shoshana Conover and Cantor Shira Ben David.
And we'll begin with Kriya, so I'll invite those who have pinned with the Kriya ribbons to rise. Perfect, yeah. You know what? I'm going to come over this way. Well, I was on microphone, so it's my fault. So I'll just say that this is a tradition where when Job had heard about the death of his loved ones, he rent his garment right over his heart to show the way in which people he loved had been torn right from his heart. So we respect that tradition today by having this ribbon over our hearts in order to show the way in which that even when we are confounded by death, that still we find ways to say that we are both torn apart, and yet we also know that we continue from this day. And so I'll ask you to say after me, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. And so you can just do that little tear. You can do it vertically. I can start this one. And if anybody else wants a little starter. And then you don't have to do a big tear, just a little one. Sure. They taught us this in rabbinical school. I like overzealousness too. You get extra points. You might get like demoting points though with your dad. Only because you were too zealous to do a mitzvah. And you can be seated. So as we are together to remember this extraordinarily brilliant man who helped to shape the lives of so many through psychoanalysis, I want to share with you, I think probably my favorite story that I've heard repeated over these past days. Firstly, I loved that his son said that Arnold was Jewish in a Freudian sense. And that when he was contemplating continuing through yeshiva and possibly becoming a rabbi, that his uncle said, before you do, make sure it is that you read both Shakespeare and Freud. And after he did this, he went to the rabbi of the yeshiva and said that he was leaving. And the rabbi asked, "Why are you leaving?" And Arnold said, "Because I don't believe in God." And the rabbi responded, "That's why you're leaving?" And so in truth, Arnold probably identified maybe only with one of the great Jewish songs and prayers that we sing during the Passover Seder, that very soon we'll be singing together in just a few short weeks. It's called Dayenu, or It Would Have Been Enough. And for someone who has had as meaningful and many chapters of his life as Arnie did, Dayenu does indeed seem appropriate for what we could sing. And maybe today I'll say it rather than sing it. So if Arnold had grown up humbly on the west side of Chicago with loving parents and grandparents, but did not have two wonderful younger brothers, Dayenu. If Arnie had two wonderful brothers, Norman and Sheldon, but did not have a great education, from secular school to yeshiva to earning a medical degree, Dayenu. If Arnold had a great education but did not find Freud, well, okay, Dayenu. If Arnold found Freud but did not find his first love, Uni, Dayenu. If Arnie found Uni but did not raise 4 incredible sons, none of them wicked, that's a little Seder humor, Dayenu. If Arnold raised 4 sons but did not have a career transforming lives through psychoanalysis, Dayenu. If Arnie made a career in psychoanalysis but did not rivet the field through his analysis of the arts while Uni was alive and after she died, Dayenu. If he riveted the field through analysis but did not make an impression on Eva while doing so, Dayenu. If he had made an impression on Eva but did not fall head over heels in love for a second time in his life, Dayenu. If he fell in love with Eva, but did not share with her intellectual pursuits, a full social calendar, and deeper analysis of even more of the arts, Dayenu. If Arnie shared all this with her, but did not become a wonderful stepfather, father-in-law, grandfather, and great-grandfather for all of his grandchildren, all of them great, Dayenu. If Arnold was a wonderful family man in all these ways, but did not make time for every person he met, from the doormen in his building to every member of his family, to the scholars and analysts with whom he shared passions, Dayenu. But of course, in one lifetime, he did all of this, made time for all of us, lived a life in which really only until his very last breaths did he capitulate and say, "This incredible life has been enough and has left us all to say, Dayenu." Eva, the way that you lengthened his days, a miracle. And I want to say to his children and their wives, his grandchildren, his stepson, his great-grandchildren, thank you for sharing your father, your beloved, your father-in-law, your stepfather, your grandfather, a friend to so many. Thank you for sharing him with all of us. And so to Joe, your wife Beth, to Lad, your wife Toby, and Dan, your wife Carolyn, Jeff, your wife Marta. I'm trying to make eye contact with those of you I can see. And also to stepson Alan, and to your wife Toby, as well as to his grandchildren, to Sam and partner Isabel, Isaac, partner Lauren, to Lucy, partner Wayne, Emma, whose partner is Mike, to Julia and Billy, Nate and Lady Bird, to Matthew, Ethan, Wendy, and Anna, to Catalina, Sylvie, Rowan, Cypress, Everwild Woods, and Elliot Skybird. To all of you, we offer our condolences. And on behalf of this family, I want to say a special thank you to Gordana Savchik. Where are you, Gordana? There you are. Thank you. Thank you. For 20 years, you have been a wonderful presence in this family's life, and you truly, with Eva's help, lengthened Arnold's days. and made them last and be meaningful to the very, very last day. Thank you. And so in these moments, we quiet ourselves with some words from our faith, Shiviti.
Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot lachen samach libi vayagel kvodi af besari shkon lavetav כי לא תעזוב נפשי לישון, לא תיתן חסידך לראות שחת, תודיעני אורח חיים, אורח חיים. שובע שמחות את פניך נעימות במנחה נצח. שביתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד, כי מימיני בא למות.
We read together the 23rd Psalm. It can be found in your program. Together we recite, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever."
Adonai roi lo achsar binot asher yarbitzeni al mei menuchot ינעלני נפשי ישובב ינחני במגלי צדק למען שמו גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
Arnold Tobin was born in Chicago on the West Side in 1928 to Philip and Rose Tobin. During the Depression, they lived in a basement apartment with Arnold's paternal grandparents. As his father tried to make it as a professional dancer and boxer, Arnold grew up the oldest of 3 boys with brothers Sheldon and Norman. And when the boys were very little, They would go to dance marathons where his parents would compete to try to be the last couple standing to take home a little prize money. Now, Arnold was a street kid, didn't have much money, and in fact, sometimes his parents would take their sons to bar mitzvahs and to weddings for the free food. And after the Depression, when Arnie was around 13 years old, Arnie's father got work as an electrician and an electric contractor. And still, Arnie's father taught Arnie how to box. Yet he had a great mind as well. So he got into a yeshiva where he learned Talmud and Jewish philosophy and legal codes. Still, he was the one, inevitably, who got nominated to fight the Italian kids in the neighborhood when an argument arose. Now, Arnie excelled in the yeshiva. He was groomed to be an Orthodox rabbi when, as I shared, Uncle Mike, his mother's brothers, told him to read Shakespeare and Freud before committing. And when he met Freud, his life was never the same. And also, it was right around this time that he met his beloved first wife, Uni, and you know, the rest is history. Arnold met Uni at Union Pier near Indiana Dunes when he tagged along with some friends hoping to meet a girl. At the time, he was 15 going on 16, and by all accounts, it was love at first sight. Now, in that same year, he left the yeshiva, had his first bite of unkosher food, and decided he would enter the medical field. So the following year, he graduated from high school at age 17, and he worked his way through college as a waiter at a fraternity house. Let that sink in. A waiter at a fraternity house. And at 20, he entered medical school, and the next year, he and Uni were married. About 9 months later, Joe was born, and after medical school, Arnie began his residency in Detroit, where Ladd was born. And the following year, Arnold was drafted in the Korean War to serve in a naval hospital in Oakland, California, with service members who had, as we would refer to it today, post-traumatic stress syndrome. It was in Oakland, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It was in Oakland that Jeff was born, and that Arnie began to put his medical training and passion for Freud to good work. There he worked with 60 patients in a psychiatric ward. Many of them were 18 years old. Some had lost limbs, all had survivor's guilt. Arnold was determined to change the treatment of these patients, which up until this time was largely punitive in nature. To stop these young men's outbursts, they were regularly given solitary confinement or heavy sedatives. But Arnie transformed their treatment when he was put in charge. He began group therapy sessions where these young men could share their experiences and begin to process their guilt and other emotional traumas exacerbated by the war. And this treatment was incredibly successful. He brought what he learned from his experiences back to Michael Reese Hospital right here in Chicago, where he returned to complete his residency. And Uni and Arnold moved their family to Highland Park, where Dan was born. And that is where Arnie and Uni raised their 4 sons. Arnold was an extraordinary psychoanalyst, heavily influenced in his early career by Roy Grinkhurst Sr. and Teresa Benedict. He was an Orthodox Freudian, highly critical of neo-Freudianism and self-psychology. He committed to being a therapist, and he was highly beloved by his patients. He treated several adolescents, many of whom had suicidal ideation. And in fact, that film, Ordinary People, while Judd Hirsch's character as the son's analyst, many say, was based on Arnie. He never denied it. He not only was good to his patients, but he trained other analysts who were MDs as well as other social workers. And in the 1970s, he piloted a program of restorative justice after receiving a grant from Lake County. He was involved in democratic politics with UNI. They hosted many artists in their home, and they were supporters of the arts. And all of his sons were both brain and brawn, taking after their father. Arnie was a good athlete and very competitive. He was hard to beat in anything. So he told his sons when they were teenagers, there will be no easy Oedipal victory. He was grateful that each of his sons met their partners, women of great character, intellect, and care. And he loved doting on his grandchildren, even from the time they were babies. He loved the physical care for them and being silly and goofy with them. And after his beloved Uni died, he met Eva. And as we can all attest, they were amazing together. As Arnie's son said, they never met a more energetic couple in their 60s, let alone their 90s. They were out 3 to 4 times a week, and Arnie introduced Eva to sports, and Eva fell in love with the Bulls, and even experienced several seasons where they would go to those games with Shelley and Badana, to several games every season in the heyday of the Bulls, so just imagine that. They loved being able to go to dinner together after that. He loved the opera as a kid, so he got Eva into opera, and Eva loved the symphony from the time she was a child, and so she introduced him to the symphony. They drew energy from each other. Eva kept Arnie young because he was just trying to keep up with her. We all are. They were social. They traveled presenting in conventions for the Psychoanalytic Institute. They loved analyzing authors, playwrights, and they would do this through a psychoanalytic lens. They loved to eat out, but on a deeper level, they understood each other better than anyone else in their lives. Arnie had grown up poor. That was the experience of Eva when she made it to this country. They knew what it was to lose a love of their life, and they knew what it was to truly be together, and what a profound gift it was to have a second true love. They each loved people. As Eva said, Arnie could get a stone to talk. And he loved getting to know everyone. I mentioned the doormen before. Well, one of them is actually here with us today. So it's great to see you. Where are you? It's wonderful to see you today. Thank you for being here with the family. It means a lot, Ron. And they also, so many of those doormen came up one by one to say goodbye to Arnie. What a tribute to a great, great man. And so today there are others who would like to have a formal way of saying goodbye to a father, to a stepfather, and to a husband. So I'll invite the sons to come forward one by one to be able to say a tribute to their dad. Thank you, Joe. That was wonderful. You really nailed it.
Well, if I had a title for what I'm going to say, it would be, Who was Arnold Tobin? That's a good question. I think Rabbi Conover just did a brilliant job of weaving together so many facets of who he was. But his sons inevitably will have some different take on the same events. So my brothers and I debated the order, and it just seemed to make sense that to answer the question, this key question, who is Arnold Tobin, would begin with the wisest, the oldest. So who was Arnie Tobin? That's a good question. As the rabbi said, Arnie was born in a home that was impoverished. Maybe she didn't explain, it was also extremely chaotic. His father was charming and charismatic, but let's just say he was a man who didn't have the most scrupulous morals and ethics. His mother Rose was quiet and seemingly sweet, but as they say, a real piece of work. Arnie and his parents and brothers Shelley and Norm for several years lived in a basement flat with his paternal grandparents, who themselves were a bigger-than-life couple. We grew up hearing stories of his grandmother Jenny dragging her husband home from the bar, and even of the two of them getting into fights at home that sometimes turned into fisticuffs. So I relate this family history, his early years, to help answer the question of why I think Arnie became a yeshiva boy and who planned to become a rabbi. I don't think it was that he was devout, but rather that the yeshiva provided a respite from his chaotic household. Not just a respite, but something more, a place for intellectual activity. I picture the yeshiva as a place where the rabbi would lead his students in debating such questions as, why was Abraham willing to obey God's command to kill his son Isaac? Now, I haven't been to a yeshiva, so this is somewhat of a projection. Years later, when I was a graduate student, Arnie gave me 2 volumes of the textbook they used, the Pentateuch and Haftorahs, that I understood to be the textbook as the boys got older, and more advanced yeshiva boys. And I was struck that the top third of each page had a passage from the Torah in Hebrew and English, but 2/3 of the page were commentary with hundreds, even 1,000 years of Jewish debate about how the Torah could be endlessly complicated and needed endless analysis and debate. For instance, it would have on the first line, God created in Hebrew and English, in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. Then the commentary would say, so what was before the beginning? Why is the word for God here the plural form, Elohim? So I picture Arnie eagerly jumping into these textual debates. So now I'm jumping ahead to 1943, I think it was. So Arnie, as the rabbi said, is 15 years old, a pious yeshiva boy.
Let's take this off so that we have
Oh, thank you. So he, seems to be a pious yeshiva boy, and he meets Uni Millstone, as the rabbi said, in Union Pier. And a year later, his life had changed. Let's just say before that, he'd never even eaten in a restaurant, and after that, he was eating cheeseburgers, both literally, and you could take that as a metaphor for other things going on in his life. Okay, jump ahead 8 more years. Now he's 24, he's married, father of 2 little boys, beginning his psychiatric residency at Michael Reese, and having decided to swap his earlier career goal of being a rabbi for a psychoanalyst. So why did Arnold Tobin make this change? Was this a radical shift in who he was and what he believed? Yes and no. I think it's less of a change than it seems. As many have pointed out, Judaism and psychoanalysis have much in common. Foremost, I suggest, was the process of interpretation and also posing the right questions to try to answer. At the Chicago Institute for Psychoanalysis, the analysts and psychoanalytic candidates debated the meanings of the contents of Freud's canonical texts. During these years, Arnie mastered the Freudian corpus and embraced a rigorous way of working with patients. This featured the analyst leading his patients through a process of interpreting their symptoms, dreams, slips, neurotic behaviors, focusing not on providing answers, but posing questions such as, what do you think the dream means? Why do you think you keep making these same mistakes? Eventually leading to the patient learning to raise and answer such questions themselves. So in the 70s, I was a graduate student in human development at University of Chicago, and one semester I audited a seminar Arnie was offering at Michael Reese to the psychiatric residents. So each session, he would interview a man who had committed a serious crime and was now out on parole. And he would lead the man in a discussion to try to figure out what had motivated the crime. Arnie provided no answers or interpretations, but instead just posed questions for the man to ponder. I was amazed at how well, using his approach to lead these men into having insights in one session, he could make such dramatic progress. When I finished my PhD and became a professor, I began to teach a research methods course I called Interpreting the Interview and Other Texts, a course I taught for 30 years till I retired. In creating this class, I followed a model of teaching that I was very aware I had picked up from Arnie. In the class, the first day, the first thing I would do is pass out a copy of his whole Talmud study book, the Haftorah. And I would say to them, let's just look at the first line here. In the beginning, God created. Just even that much. And I'd say, see what you can come up with. Can you make any meaning? See what they could do. And I would direct them not to jump to interpretations, but instead to try to identify good questions. Like the old question from the yeshiva, what was before the beginning? Now I jump once more to the last years of his life. I attended a Rosh Hashanah dinner at the University Club, hosted as Eva so graciously did for Rosh Hashanah and Passover each year. And Arnie was not his old self by this time. He was, I sat next to him, he was struggling to get across what he wanted to say, and I was just trying to help him. So he'd hit the side of his glass and try to get everyone's attention, but people were just talking to each other. So I would say, Arnie has something he wants to say. Arnie says he thinks we need to have a discussion of an important question. So I'd say, Arnie says the question we should debate tonight is, it should be about Abraham and Isaac, but not why did Abraham seem to agree to murder his son, but what was Sarah's role in this? Let's discuss that. So some people gamely tried to make contributions. It was kind of a tough crowd for the debate Arnie wanted to have. But various people commented, and then I offered my own interpretation to answer his question, which in my mind was in the spirit of Arnie, both the yeshiva years and also his passionate interest in his work in sex, and which he saw as the core question of psychoanalysis. So the question I said is, I think the bigger question here isn't why Abraham pondered killing his son. I think what's really the most amazing thing is, here we have a 90-year-old couple who still had an active sex life. So I hope he appreciated my comment. Okay, last section. So as we know, Arnie was struggling in the hospital towards the end. He was no longer himself. And my brother Ladd overheard this conversation. The nurse says, do you know what year it is? He says, 1965. She says, do you know where you are? He says, a college? She says, do you think you were in a college or a hospital? And Arnie said, now that's a good question. Arnie himself to the last.
I went into therapy when I was in my 30s, and by then I had a lot of material stored up. And in the first 5 minutes, I said to this therapist, my father is a psychoanalyst, a very orthodox Freudian psychoanalyst, but I'm nothing like him. I'm not like him. I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for classical Freudian psychoanalysis. And he said, what are you looking for? And I said, and I'm also not looking for behavioral therapy, cognitive therapy, relational therapy, somatic therapy. I'm not interested in that. I don't want cohesion. I don't want... He said, well, what do you want? I said, I don't want that. I don't want someone interrupting me when I'm trying to get to free associate here. And he said, I think I understand. You're looking for somebody who's nothing like your father, but exactly like your father. And I think that's been a kind of lifelong struggle for me, is even in times, or especially when I want to differentiate from my father, when I do have disagreements with positions or styles that he had, he's so deeply in my head and so persuasive in many ways that even ideas that I had questions about, I still find compelling. For example, when I would make a slip or an error as a little kid, he would say, well, there's an explanation for that. Those things aren't all accidents. I mean, that's hard enough when you're 20 or 30 or 40, but if you're like 3 or 4, that's a kind of a complicated notion to work through. I still believe he was right, but it was a lot to take on. He also would tell us that illnesses were psychosomatic. This is a guy who would ask not to be given an anesthesia during a colonoscopy or a cataract surgery. He really didn't think that, he had a lot of skepticism about medicine. He actually found us a dentist who didn't believe in Novocaine, and a doctor who had a lot of doubts about antibiotics. Again, it's in my mind that there's a kind of moral failure sometimes if you resort to medicine, because it was so much part of his thinking. I went with him a couple of years ago with Eva, maybe it was a year ago, to an appointment with a doctor at the University of Chicago because my father's blood pressure was very high. And the doctor said, I think you're going to have to take blood pressure medication, which he had resisted. It's dangerous. And my father said, I can control this with my mind. Just give me some time, I can do it. And the doctor said, well, I think I understand where you're coming from. I was analyzed myself. I understand that world. If you're trying to control it with your mind, not going to take meds, wouldn't it be useful to talk to someone about this? My father said, now that's a problem. I don't think there's anyone left in the city who's really qualified to treat me. I kind of found it awesome that he had such a powerful sort of sense of how he wanted to live his life and went fully realized version, even though there were things that I had doubts about. I think in terms of meds, he kind of out-Freuded Freud. I mean, Freud smoked cigars and tried cocaine. My father resisted aspirin, thought that there was something about it that still hadn't been fully studied. And that, again, if we used our minds, we could control it. I got injured in a Little League baseball game once and felt something snap. I dived for a ball. I went over. My father was in the stands. I said, I don't think I can keep playing. He said, are you anxious about something? Which often I was. That's the thing. Again, these ideas are enormously compelling. It's not as if I can say I don't believe them. It's just that I find myself constantly trying to wrestle with them, which I do and which I don't. I thought for a while they all came from Freud. But even as the rabbi said, there are no easy Oedipal victories. I Googled it, I searched it, I haven't found it. I mean, it's one of the many ones that was a kind of Arnie Tobinism. And there are many of those that I came later to realize came from him. For example, when we wanted to get a pet, he said, people who like animals are people who can't relate to other people. So I thought, well, there must be something to it. I mean, let me think about that for the next several decades. Then my wife and I are on a trip, and we go to a museum that had a exhibit about Freud, and there he is with all these dogs. And then I read, he loved his dogs. He even had dogs in the session. He had a dog that he would make eye contact with so the dog could alert him that the session time was up. But again, in the moment, my dad said these things with such great confidence. He was so good at asserting things, even things that in some cases were a little nutty. Another was never buy retail. I can years later think, if you buy something for this amount or this amount, whether it was on sale or not, if you got the thing you want, that's the thing that makes most sense. But I found my father's idea was, even if you don't want the thing, if it's on sale, there's something really appealing about it. So once again, as my family will tell you, I've come home with some things that I didn't really want, but I thought, look, such a deal. My main point here is my father was a really powerful figure, I think in a lot of people's lives. I can speak personally in mine. And in many wonderful ways. Even at times when I wanted to resist or I had a different idea, I found myself wrestling with his ideas and incorporating many of them. But I want to end by saying that even there were ways that he was hard for me and hard on a lot of people. He didn't want things to be easy. He could be confrontational. He could be provocative. At the times that were the very toughest in these last years, I feel enormously grateful to you, Eva, for being there with him, for making his life richer and better in every way during those years. And I'm thankful that you did that for him. I'm thankful that you did that for us, because I know how hard that would be if we had been there for that. And so I will keep in mind forever my father's teachings, even ones I want to still debate, but I'll also always feel incredible love and gratitude for you for what you did for him. Thanks.
I'm Jeff, for those who don't know. I feel as though I never really knew my father, and I have an idea of why this is. I remember my father citing Freud saying that psychoanalysis aims to help people become able to love and to work. Freud may not have actually said that. Much of what any believer believes is apocryphal, but no less true. As an adherent of Freud from his 18th year to his 98th, my father knew the words were something Freud could have said. My father is undoubtedly able to love and to work. He had two passionate monogamous loves, one for almost half a century and the other for over a quarter. The first was ended by her death, the second by his. And he was as faithful to Freud as he was to his wives. My father spent his career vigorously defending Freud from those whom he saw as too repressed or puritanical to stay centered on the resolution of the Oedipus complex. It was because of how intensely my father loved and worked that I never really knew him. No one on the outside ever really knows what happens inside a marriage or in a psychoanalysis. While I lived in Chicago, I would occasionally meet someone who knew my father professionally, usually students or supervisees, a couple of times patients maybe. They always said that he was brilliant and insightful, which is something I already knew. But what they were most adamant in observing was that he was an exceptionally attentive listener and enthusiastic talker, which I came to believe because I heard it so often. My father was not the same person at home that he was at work. I hope no one is, not least of all a therapist. Friends would say, he must psychoanalyze you all the time, but he didn't. He saw his first patient at 7 a.m. and then had a quick breakfast with us before returning to the office. 4 days a week, it was after 7 p.m. when he got home, where we'd be waiting for him for dinner. During those breakfasts between patients and dinners after 12-hour days, my father was understandably tired, maybe even distracted. I imagine now that he was still processing what he had heard at the office. I finally fully connected my father to the reports that he was an enthusiastic and attentive conversationalist when he was the guest speaker at a college class I had on Freud. Talking to college students about the interpretation of dreams, he was inspired. He was ardent and focused. He understood what each student tried to ask, answered us in terms we could grasp, and then led us to questions that we had not yet known to ask. Though I could not see inside his marriages, I could see that he brought to them the same exceptional intensity that he brought to his work. Though in many ways, Uni and Eva could hardly be more different, what they had in common indicates something about what love meant to my father. As quick and verbal as he was, he found partners who were even quicker and better with words. Women who could and would challenge him and with whom he was eager to converse even after spending all day in conversation with patients. My father is a man of his time in that he believed his role was to earn a living and his wife's role to handle the household. When we were young, he counted on Uni to be the primary parent. When we were older, he counted on Uni and later on Eva to keep in touch with us and to arrange the couple's social life. I have no doubt that Eunice and Eva's exceptional social skills factored in Arnie's wanting to form a couple with each of them. He valued their tastes more than his own, and he deferred to each of them to organize how to get together with friends, to attend cultural events, and to go on trips. I do not mean to give the impression that my father was uninvested in our lives. As I'm sure, as my brothers have already said and will say, he was passionately invested in us, including in our sporting and our scholarly successes. One way he sought to help us succeed was by presenting himself as an authority for us to challenge. He also modeled for us how to be a husband by immersing himself so fully into his marriages and in psychoanalysis. He showed us what he considered to be essential for living a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. I believe he wanted us to learn from his example just what Freud is said to have said, that every person should endeavor to learn how to love and how to work.
Those are tough acts to follow. I've been following them for 65 years. 68, somewhere around there. I think it was my father's 90th birthday when I decided the best way to pay tribute to Arnie was to celebrate the two loves of his life, who came very different people, came to him at very different times of his life, one early when he was still a teenager and one much later. But they both inspired his passion and helped shape his worldview and his personality. I'm talking, of course, of Sigmund Freud and Michael Jordan. Dad could be enigmatic like Freud, but he was ferociously competitive like Jordan in everything. The rabbi asked us yesterday what one word we would use to describe Arnie, and I said fighter. He grew up as a boxer who broke his father's rib while sparring. That was not an easy Oedipal victory. It was a painful one. He fought everybody in the Institute about Freud's legacy and purpose. There was never a referee that Arnie didn't differ with. I think he was the only parent in the history of Highland Park wrestling who came down on the mat while I was wrestling to argue directly with the referee. You could tell there was a hush over the crowd. They had never quite seen a guy in street shoes in the middle of a match screaming at the ref about his failure to call the chicken wing that was being applied to me. My brothers were very successful wrestlers. I had become good at not getting pinned because I had played that role so often with my brothers. I played it exceptionally well in high school. He also fought with doctors. That might be surprising. He had an ultimate trump card later in life, which was, hey, I'm 97. How old are you? I would echo what's been said about Eva and the roles she played. I got a taste of the roles she played. And just for one night, I think Eva belongs on the Arnie's Mount Rushmore alongside Sigmund and Michael for the care she gave to him, her dogged determination to get him to follow doctor's orders, to keep in good health. There was one night a few years ago where Alan and his family were in town and Arnie was in the hospital and Eva was going to go out to dinner with her family, and I was really happy to give her a break and to stay with my father in the hospital. And he was agitated, as he often was in the hospital, because they had him on a low sodium diet. And he loved salt, but more than that, he thought he was in danger of sodium deprivation. And he was saying, you know, you can't go too long without salt, and the clock is ticking, and what are you doing? And I said, well, I talked to the doctors, they're worried about your fluid retention. And he said, look, this is a much more pressing issue than that. You've got to do something. You know, I can't believe you've come all this way and you're just deferring to them. And I'm thinking, boy, this is a tough role I've walked into. I said, I'll talk to them again. I just got to go check into the hotel, pick up some dinner, and I'll come back and have dinner with you. He said, okay. So I go and check into the hotel, and I get a call from Arnie, and he says, where are you? And I said, I told you, I'm picking up dinner. He said, where? I said, Big Al's Italian Beef. He said, tell you what do they have on the menu besides the Italian beef? I said, well, they got hot dogs, and they've got Polish. He said, you get me a Polish and some French fries. And he said, and put it in your backpack, because it wouldn't be good to get caught sneaking that into the hospital. So I got this big bag of French fries and Polish and my Italian beef. And I've got it stuffed in my backpack, which smells like a grease fire. And I come in, and we sit down together, and he says, break off a couple of pieces of that Polish and hand me some fries. And I do that, and he's nodding, and he takes out a napkin, and he carefully wipes his hands. He picks up his phone, and he says, hey Siri, how much sodium in a Polish sausage? And I thought I was doing a dying man's last wish to get a Polish sausage from Big Al's. He had outsmarted me once again. Eva, he told me never to repeat this story to you. But he was tenacious and very shrewd. I saw my dad 2 days before he died, and I couldn't tell if he recognized me. He didn't respond. Well, he may have responded. I thought every squeeze of the hand, every change in expression, he was hearing me and responding. But what he responded most to is I started singing songs from our childhood, songs he had sung to us. And he seemed to get a faint smile on his face. And I'd like to sing one of those songs for you. Forgive me, Cantor, for my voice. And I will urge you to join in. I think this shows another side of Arnie, but one keeping with my theme of Arnie the Fighter. This is a song by another hero of Arnie's, Woody Guthrie. Don't you push me, push me, push me, don't you push me down. Don't you push me, push me, push me, don't you push me down. Oh, you can play with me, you can take my hand. We can walk together down to the Pretzel Man. You can wear my mommy's shoes, you can wear my daddy's hat. You can even laugh at me, but don't you push me down. Don't you push me, push me, push me, don't you push me down. Don't you push me, push me, push me, don't you push me down. Thank you for joining in.
So beautiful.
My voice?
That's exactly what you can have my job.
For the past 28 years, the Lazarus-Lichtenberg family has been incredibly lucky to have had Arnie in our lives. While Toby and I were already 30 when we met Arnie, for our 4 children, Matthew, Ethan, Wendy, and Anna, Arnie was never a step anything. He was simply Arnie, their grandfather, the only one they'd ever known, and their lives are so much richer for it. Arnie was there for both the major milestones and the quiet moments in between. He was there for the first hazy weeks when they were newborns. He was there for the bar and bat mitzvahs, the trips near and far, and of course, numerous visits. As others have mentioned, it was truly a gift that both Eva and Arnie found each other in their 60s. They shared a beautiful, full life together. What we will miss most, though, are conversations, typically over a long meal. We covered everything: world events, Jewish history in Chicago, psychoanalysis, and a long history of mediocrity for the post-Jordan Bulls. No matter the topic, Arnie always brought a perspective that made us think more deeply and quite often laugh. We will miss him.
Okay. That's closer. Okay. Well, I will start out by saying that I, of course, will miss Arnie greatly in my life. It will impoverish my life, although I intend to, of course, go on living. But I want you to know that before I came here this afternoon, I found on my email more than 25 emails, so, a lot from the Institute for Psychoanalysis, but many just from people who knew him from anywhere and who were expressing sympathy and condolence and expressing thoughts of what he had done for them, what they learned from him, what they enjoyed from him, and so on and so forth. I only wish he could have known how people did like him. And he liked people, they liked him, and I think it's a great tribute to what he had. I will begin by talking about how I met Arnie. I've been asked that by some people, and it is a bit of a funny story. He was running a program for the benefit of the Institute. He did it 3 times using the actors of Writers Theater up in Glencoe. He did 1 in his home. He did 2 in some other places. I only went to 1, the one in his home. And it was somewhat profitable for the Institute, these programs. It was sort of a benefit for them. And what he used some actors, 3 or 4 from the theater, was to do scenes from Shakespeare about love. And they were brief scenes, it wasn't the whole play. And then he opened it for discussion as to what this all meant, or why were the actors saying what they were saying, or why did they feel that way, and so on, and opened it all for about 50, 60 people who were in the audience. And I was very, very impressed. He moderated it in a just wonderful way, and from every one of these scenes, you came away with a nugget of insight. And I, impressed as I was, but there were 60 people there. He certainly didn't notice me there. And I wrote a glowing thank you note, which I don't think you paid much attention to. And so I set out to work because I was determined to meet this man who was more impressive to me, more interesting to me than any of the others I was meeting after 10 years of being a widow. And I was determined to meet him. So I was friendly with the wife of someone who I knew was a psychoanalyst, and I asked her, couldn't she, or he really, her husband, do something by way of arranging an introduction to me? And so he did, but in a circuitous way. He arranged to see him, and he told him whatever virtues ever he thought about me or whatever, and encouraged him to call me. And he had a litany of excuses why he wasn't really that interested, because he lived in the suburbs, she lives in the city. Besides, he's very busy with a lot of things and this and that and so on. And he let it go at that. 6 weeks later, when nothing had happened, he called upon him again. And he began in the usual way, asking, well, had he called him? No, whatever, so on. And then he mentioned a very important fact, that I had been the first Jewish president of the Women's Association of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And suddenly Arnie's ears perked up and he said, that's really interesting. Tell me more about this. And he went on to tell him how I like music and art and operas and all kinds of cultural things and so on, and repeated the story about the presidency of the major support group of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And at that point he said, well, that I can't pass up. I think I will call her, and after all I can lose is a dinner, and the rest is history. We shortly thereafter went out, immediately hit it off, both of us. In fact, after the dinner at the Italian Village, he said, now can I come up to your apartment for a while? Let's continue this discussion. And after midnight, he took a taxi home to Highland Park, to his home, and made further things. And anyway, after a year together, and being sometimes wondering if maybe you should take a little more time, go a little more slowly. But after all, he was almost 70, and I was almost 65, and therefore, after a year of being together, we got married, and a marriage that lasted for 28 years. And it was very happy for both of us. And so on. And I will tell you about some of the details, some of the things that my taste had not been a mistake. It worked out the way I wanted it, he wanted it, and so on and so forth. But one of the things that we did sort of uniquely with each other for about 18 years was did programs, particularly for the conventions of conventions for the Psychoanalytic Association. They met regularly in New York in winter and somewhere else in the country in late spring. And what we did for the programs was took a work of a drama because they were already doing programs for novels, for music, for other kinds of literary works. So we thought we wouldn't compete with them and so on, and we took various kinds of dramas from anywhere in the world in translation of English. And we analyzed not so much psychobiography, which a lot of people were doing, but analysis of what motivated the characters in the program, in the play. Why were they so self-destructive? Or how did they come to these decisions that weren't very effective for them or whatever? And we had 6 people at the first program, because I don't think anybody knew us. They may have known Army, but they didn't know me. So anyway, and after that took off, we had 50, 60 people. We didn't have enough chairs in the room, and went on and on. The dramas were from in translation from France, from Austria. Partly that was my influence, from England, anywhere else, and occasionally the United States. Oh, also Russia. We did a lot of Chekhov, too. So this was great fun for us, and we developed a reputation. And it was only stopped after 18 years because then the program developers said to us, we've got to give somebody else a chance, so why don't you take a little rest? And very soon thereafter, of course, the whole analytic conventions and so on varied, and that was it. But both of us enjoyed that increasingly, and we even we did it for movies too. We did it for movies at the Institute for a while. That was another part that we did. And in Chicago, we developed a little reputation because after some dramas, particularly at some of those smaller local theaters, they wanted to develop discussions and help the audience understand the play better and so on. And so sometimes, for instance, one of the theaters did actually Oedipus Rex, right? Perfect gist for the Psychoanalytic Association. And so we had to, after the play was completed, we had to discuss it up there, answer questions and so on about it. So that was a good part of I should say I got into the Psychoanalytic Association a little by the back door doing that, because when I was a student in getting a degree in clinical psychology, unless you were a medical student, you couldn't enter the psychoanalytic program. That changed later, but by the time it changed, it was not a good time in my life before I had met Arnie, so I didn't do it. But at any rate, this was great fun. And my life with him was also so good because he enjoyed life. He enjoyed the finer things of life in all respects. I mean, he wanted good food, he wanted good entertainment in terms of getting together with other people and doing interesting things, and he had a lot of energy. He was the only one I ever met who had as much energy as I did, stopping only after illness much later in his age wore him down. But we piled on things. We liked traveling too. Of course, traveling was first stopped by COVID and then later by ill health. But we kept going for a long, long time, doing all these interesting things. And it enriched my life. He enjoyed it to the hilt. And so that was the private success here that we had and enjoyed. He also loved, and it never stopped. I mean, even now, until perhaps very few weeks ago, was still running some programs by Zoom. As some of you know, you came up to me. He had some groups who were doing case discussions or things like that. He loved applying psychoanalysis at any time that he could. And he loved the books we read, and we loved the plays we saw, and so forth. So I will close with the remarks of someone who, an English author, who said that a man will be, the best things in life that he can do and that are the most valuable is to be loved by the community, loved by, and loved by your family. And I think he certainly succeeded in that. And in the family, I should mention that our 4 grandchildren, Alan's, Arnie's and my 4, Arnie has two sets of grandchildren. He has his own with Eunice, and he has 4 with me. And when each of them born, he just quelled with joy. He couldn't wait to hear about what was going on with them. Did you hear from them today? And so on. He would be very pleased that all 4 of them are here today. And of course, for them, he's the only grandfather experience that they have, because when Alan and Toby got married, there were no fathers there. Both fathers were dead. There were 2 mothers. And then when Arnie came into our life, here was a grandfather figure who enjoyed them, who when they were even very little, played with them, tried to do things with them when we visited. And they were an added joy in his life to his own grandchildren. And the great-grandchildren, unfortunately, we didn't even manage to see all of them, because by that time, between COVID first and then the poor health, we weren't flying or going anymore. So anyway, I've had a good life with him. I hope he had a good life with me. And the rest is, it inevitably happens. We all walk the same path. Thank you.
I invite everyone to please rise as we pray that Arnie's soul is bound up in everlasting life as he rests in peace.
El malei rachamim shochein b'mromim hamitzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina im kroshim utorim kezahar haraki amazhirim et nishmat Avraham shall halach leolamo bal harachamim yasirehu b'seiter knafav leolamim v'yitror החיים את נשמתו, הרוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Dr. Arnold Tobin, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
We remain standing as we turn to the back of the program, where we find the words of Kaddish Yatom, the words of the mourner's Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ויעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחיי אחון וביום אחון, ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו,
אמן.
יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקדושה בריחו. לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו, אמן. יהי שלום הרבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו אמן.
עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, אמרו אמן.
Zichrono livracha. His memory is an everlasting benediction.
And friends, this concludes the services here in the sanctuary. The family is inviting everyone to join them for a brief reception in the social hall upon the conclusion of the service. And then Shiva will continue at the University Club at 76 East Monroe today and Tuesday. So that is Monday and Tuesday from 5 until 8:30 p.m. And the family has arranged for valet parking to be available at the University Club as well. The family has requested that any memorial contributions in his memory to either the American Jewish Committee, the Chicago Psychoanalytic Institute, or the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. That information is available in the service folder that you should have received when you came in today. And if you did not receive one when you came in, we do have those for you as you leave the sanctuary. For those of you joining us online, all of that information is available on our website. At this time, I would ask everyone to please remain standing just for a few moments as we escort the family and the clergy from the sanctuary. Thank you.